Have you ever wondered, can a child expose a monster with just one look? Imagine this, you're a 5-year-old child sitting in a cold, intimidating courtroom. Right in front of you is the person who stole your voice. No one can help you except for one four-legged friend, a dog with a long scar down its back, eyes sharp as if they can pierce through lies. And then, in the blink of an eye, everything changes. What happened that left the entire courtroom in stunned silence? How did a dog turn the tide in a case no one believed could be won? If you're curious about the answers, make sure to subscribe now and leave a comment. Do you believe in a dog's extraordinary instincts? Now let's step into the story, where justice isn't just decided by humans but by a brave dog. The air inside the Fairhaven courtroom was so thick it felt almost suffocating. Every pair of eyes locked onto the heavy wooden doors as they slowly creaked open. Standing at the threshold was a little girl, no more than 5 years old, her small frame swallowed by the vastness of the room. Her tiny fingers clutched tightly onto a worn leash, gripping the rough fabric like it was the only thing keeping her on her feet. Beside her, a German shepherd moved in silence, its coat shifting in the dim light filtering through the towering stained glass windows, a long scar running down its body, a silent testimony to a battle no one spoke of. Ace, no one in that room could deny it, not Amelia, not her mother, not the silver-haired judge, whose sharp gaze missed nothing. But the most unsettling reaction came from the man seated at the defendant's table, Jacob Harrison. He didn't move, but in the flicker of his gaze, a slight tightening, a breath held too long. The entire courtroom grew even heavier. Amelia stopped. Her fingers instinctively tightened around the leash. Ace froze, his ears perked, his muscles tense beneath his coat. His breathing slowed, as if calculating the threat before him. And then a low growl rumbled through the silence. Not loud, not aggressive, but a warning. A chill swept through the room, unseen but unmistakable. A child can be broken by fear, but a dog, a former canine that had stared into the darkest faces of evil, never. There was only one reason Ace would react this way. Jacob Harrison couldn't keep up the act any longer. The dog's icy stare ripped through the perfect mask he had crafted for so long. That moment, when Amelia and Ace's eyes met, something shifted. No more silence, no more fear. Everything was about to change. Jacob Harrison sat in silence, his posture rigid, hands clasped together atop the polished wooden table. At a glance, he could be mistaken for a refined gentleman. His suit crisp, his hair meticulously combed, his face composed as if none of this concerned him in the slightest. But for those who looked closer, cracks in the illusion began to show. Too perfect, too controlled. He had mastered the art of hiding emotion. When Elijah Cooper, the defense attorney, rose to his feet, his deep, steady voice echoed through the Fairhaven courtroom. Your Honor, my client, a model citizen, a successful software engineer, is being accused based solely on the word of a 5-year-old child. A child who hasn't spoken a single word since the alleged incident. Silence swallowed the room. Some might believe it. A young girl, no credible witnesses, no physical evidence, nothing but speculation strung together. Court deals in facts, not feelings. But what Cooper and Harrison never anticipated was the presence of a witness that couldn't be manipulated. Ace. The German shepherd's lips curled slightly. A subtle movement, almost imperceptible. Jacob Harrison felt it. He stiffened. Elijah Cooper continued, his voice unwavering. But what most people failed to notice was the one thing that mattered most. Jacob Harrison was no longer in control. His once composed hands clenched tighter, his fingers pressing hard into his skin. His gaze flickered just for a moment toward Amelia Brooks. Not anger, not fear, recognition. A slow chill crept up Judge Nathaniel Morgan's spine. He didn't believe in coincidences. He didn't believe in meaningless reactions. In this moment, he saw something in Jacob Harrison's eyes. Not denial, panic. Like an animal backed into a corner, like a man who had just been exposed. The courtroom was drowning in a silence cold light, streamed through the towering windows, casting elongated shadows on the polished wooden floor. Shadows of people waiting for something, but no one expected what would happen next. Amelia Brooks didn't look at anyone. She didn't speak. Her blue eyes, glowing under the harsh ceiling lights, locked onto one single point, Jacob Harrison. And then a small movement. Amelia's tiny hand curled ever so slightly. A silent signal, a gesture that only one being in that room understood. Not her mother, holding her breath beside her. Not the judge, watching from the high bench with sharp, calculating eyes. But Ace. For an instant the German shepherd turned to stone. His ears snapped forward. His gaze sharpened like the edge of a blade. The fur along his back bristled. His breathing slowed and deliberate. Then, a low guttural growl broke the silence. Not a bark, not a snarl of anger, but a warning. Jacob Harrison went rigid. His face remained calm, controlled, but beneath the table, his hands had turned ghostly white, fingers clenching tighter, a slight tremor betraying him. Chill, unshakable and sharp, ran down his spine. No one understood why Ace reacted this way, but Amelia did. What she couldn't say in words, Ace had spoken for her. No one can train a dog to act. No one can make it react unless something is truly, unmistakably wrong. Suddenly, everyone in that courtroom knew. No one moved, no one spoke. And in that very moment, a terrifying realization struck Judge Nathaniel Morgan like a bolt of lightning. Ace knew Jacob Harrison, not from the case files, not from the whispers outside the courtroom, from somewhere else, from a place no one wanted to imagine, from the past. The sharp crack of the gavel echoed through the courtroom. "In court is in recess for 15 minutes, Judge Nathaniel Morgan announced, his voice steady but heavy with unspoken weight. He wasn't a man easily shaken, but what had just unfolded demanded immediate action. Something was wrong. He didn't believe in coincidences. A child who hadn't spoken in months suddenly signaling. A therapy dog, trained to remain calm, growling as if it had seen a ghost. Nathaniel Morgan had presided over cases for 2 decades. He had seen every kind of crime, every kind of liar, every kind of victim, some so broken they no longer recognized themselves. But this was something else. From the judge's bench, he quietly observed Amelia Brooks. The little girl was curled up next to Ace, her tiny fingers buried in the thick fur of the German shepherd, as if he were the only lifeline in a raging storm. Beside her, Charlotte Evans, her mother, knelt down, whispering something softly in her ear. But Amelia didn't answer. She only looked at Ace, the one friend she trusted. Across the room, Jacob Harrison remained motionless. He didn't react, not immediately. But Morgan had seen too much in his career to miss the truth. The slight twitch in the jaw, the faint tightening of fingers against the cold wooden table. To the untrained eye, he looked composed. But the judge knew better. He was calculating. Defense attorney Elijah Gore leaned in, whispering something quick and quiet. Harrison gave a small nod, but Morgan could already tell he had lost control of the narrative. That terrified him. As the courtroom slowly emptied, Morgan remained standing, his eyes fixed on Amelia and Ace. There was something bigger hiding beneath this case. He was going to find it. It all began on a quiet afternoon, till the nightmare arrived. The golden hues of the setting sun filtered through the trees, casting warm glow over Amelia Brooks's front yard. The 5-year-old skipped across the grass, clutching her beloved stuffed bunny to her chest. In a child's world, there was nothing but innocence. No fear, no danger. But then he appeared. A man stood by the partially open gate, a thin smile tugging at his lips. No rush, no sudden movements, just a voice, soft, familiar in a way that felt wrong. "Would you like puppies?" Amelia froze. "I have a litter in my car. They're very sweet, but they need someone special to take care of them." His eyes studied her, carefully measuring every tiny movement. Just one step closer, just a little curiosity. That's all he needed. 1 second, 2 seconds. "Hey, you there? What do you think you're doing?" A voice rang out from across the street. Samuel Wright, an elderly man with silver hair and sharp eyes, stood near the fence, gaze locked onto the stranger. He didn't shout. He didn't overreact. Just one question, but a question that carried weight. Harrison didn't move right away. He lifted his head, his expression calm. Too calm, but there it was. Hesitation. Just a fraction of a second. And that was all it took. "Amelia!" Charlotte Evans, her mother, called from inside the house. The front door swung open. This time Harrison didn't wait. He turned sharply, striding toward the waiting van. The engine roared, tires screeched against the pavement, and in an instant he was gone. Amelia stood frozen, fingers still clinging to her stuffed bunny. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just stayed silent. From that moment on, her world was never the same. Case files lay scattered across the table, their pages marked with the faces of missing children. Young, innocent eyes staring back from faded photographs. Special Agent Jonathan Hayes flipped through the reports, his sharp gaze scanning every word. This wasn't a random kidnapping. This wasn't the work of a spur-of-the-moment predator. Names, locations, patterns. The pieces were forming into something far more disturbing. 3 disappearances in the last 18 months. The voice of Special Agent Abigail Mitchell was calm, but laced with tension. Untold children, all taken near their homes. And now we have a survivor. Jonathan's fingers hovered over the photograph of Amelia Brooks. This time, he had failed, but more importantly, he had come back. This wasn't an impulsive criminal, not someone who grabbed victims on a whim. He planned, he studied, he didn't use force he didn't need to. He knew exactly what to say to make a child step into his van without ever screaming for help. Choose his victims at random, Abigail murmured, flipping through another file. It's every child has a connection. He watches them. He waits. Jonathan's brow furrowed as he studied the details. He had almost succeeded with Amelia. But she was still here, still breathing. This wasn't just another case. This was their one chance to stop him. Abigail slid another photograph across the table. Name printed beneath it made the air in the room grow heavy. Natalie Dawson missing for 6 months. She hadn't been found, or rather, they hadn't found where he was keeping her. Jonathan took a slow breath, his hands clenching into fists. It was time to hunt the predator. When Amelia Brooks returned home after the failed abduction, she was no longer the same. No more laughter ringing through the yard. No more endless stories about the imaginary worlds of a child. Only silence. Her mother, Charlotte Evans, tried everything. Her favorite comic books, the lullaby she used to hum along to. Even meals she had never once refused. Nothing could bring her back. Her father, Matthew Carter, was never good at expressing emotions. But every time he saw his daughter curled up in the corner of her room, clutching her stuffed bunny so tightly the fabric had begun to tear, the helplessness crushed him. The therapist suggested talk therapy. But how do you talk to a child who no longer believes in words? Her grandmother suggested taking her to the countryside, somewhere peaceful, but a new place wouldn't erase the fear that had rooted itself deep inside her. They had tried everything, and then, one day, Charlotte came across an article, Can a Dog Help a Child Find the Voice They've Lost? The idea sounded strange. At this point, they had nothing left to lose. That's how they met Ace. On the first day, Ace didn't touch him. She only stood there, eyes wide, watching. Ace didn't push, he just waited. On the second day, she sat a little closer. On the third day, her small hand hesitantly rested on his back. On a warm, windy summer night, when the nightmares returned, something miraculous happened. No screams, no sobbing, just a tiny hand grasping the soft fur of Ace. For the first time in months, Amelia was no longer alone. Every scar tells a story. Ace was never just an ordinary dog. Once his name carried pride among the ranks of the K9 unit. Swift, precise, fearless, a warrior on 4 legs. But everything changed on a cold, rain-soaked night. A mission to apprehend an armed suspect. Ace and his handler, the officer he trusted more than anyone, were sent in. The alleys were dark, narrow, treacherous. Then came the shout. The flash of a blade. Ace lunged before the gun could be raised. The suspect never got the chance to pull the trigger. But as Ace took him down, the man swung his arm, a knife slashed deep along Ace's side, warm blood soaking into his fur. But Ace didn't let go. Not until the sirens screamed through the streets. Not until his fellow officers had the suspect in cuffs. Only then did Ace collapse. The wound didn't take his life, but it took something else's K9 career. Ace was no longer as fast, no longer as sharp. Chases he once led became memories. So one day the decision was made. He was removed from service. Ace didn't understand. He had fought, he had been loyal, he had been willing to die, but in the end he was branded as unfit for duty, a warrior left behind. But what Ace didn't know, his mission wasn't over, because somewhere else, a 5-year-old girl bore a scar no one could see, and only Ace, only him, could help her find what she had lost. A connection beyond word. Amelia Brooks stood a short distance from Ace, her tiny hands clasped tightly together, her wide eyes filled with cautious hesitation. For months, she had learned to fear everything, but Ace was different. The German shepherd didn't rush her, didn't force anything, he simply waited. His large paws rested lightly on the wooden floor, his warm brown eyes locked onto Amelia's. No sudden movements, no noises that might startle her, just patience. Amelia flinched slightly as Ace took another slow step forward, inch by inch. But something in his gaze held her there, no threat, no pressure, just understanding. The moment stretched on endlessly, and then a small hand reached out, hesitant, uncertain. But when Amelia's fingers brushed against Ace's thick fur, the world seemed to pause. Ace didn't move. He stood still, letting her decide. She gripped a little tighter, feeling the warmth beneath her palm, the steady, living presence of something safe. Across the room, Charlotte Evans covered her mouth, silent tears spilling down her cheeks. This was the first time since that day that Amelia had touched someone without fear. The entire room seemed to hold its breath. And then, ever so slightly, Amelia shifted closer. He tilted his head, his tail giving the faintest wag, like a quiet promise. I'm here. You're not alone anymore. No one spoke. No one dared to shatter the fragile magic of the moment. But in that silence, something had changed. Amelia was no longer just a broken little girl. She had just found the first friend who could hear her pain without a single word. Sometimes silence carries more weight than 1,000 words. The Fairhaven courtroom felt thick, sick, suffocating, as if the entire room was holding its breath. Every eye was on Amelia Brooks. She sat there, small and fragile, swallowed by the oversized wooden chair. Her tiny hand rested gently on Ace's thick fur, as if his presence was the only thing keeping her safe. Across the room, Jacob Harrison remained still. Something had changed. He was no longer composed. Jenna Collins, the prosecutor, took a slow, deliberate step forward. Her voice was gentle yet sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. Amelia, can you show everyone who made you afraid that day? No one spoke. No one moved. Amelia didn't lift her head. No one knew if she could do it. She hadn't spoken a single word since that fateful day. Then a movement so small it was almost invisible. A tiny hand curled just slightly, a signal only one being in that room would understand. Ace. The German shepherd had been lying calmly at her feet, but in an instant his entire body went rigid. His ears snapped forward, his breathing deepened, muscles tensed beneath his coat like a coiled spring ready to snap. Then a growl, low, short, but unmistakably a warning. Jacob Harrison flinched, a flicker, a single heartbeat, a reflex he couldn't suppress. But it was enough for everyone in that courtroom to see. He knew Ace had recognized him. And this time he wouldn't escape. The hunt begins. The wind howled through the skeletal branches surrounding the abandoned house in Blackridge, carrying a biting chill that seeped into the skin. Special Agent Jonathan Hayes stood at the base of the rotting wooden steps, his sharp gaze sweeping across the cracked, peeling walls. No lights, no signs of life, but he knew something was waiting inside. Behind him, Special Agent Abigail Mitchell signaled to the team. The warrant had been secured. Now it was time to uncover the truth. The door groaned as it was pushed open. Inside, the darkness swallowed everything. The stench hit them instantly. Damp wood, mildew, and something else, something worse. They moved carefully, beams of light slicing through the black void. A rickety table, a filthy mattress, scattered empty food cans littering the floor. Someone had been here recently. And he's used this place before, Abigail murmured, her voice steady but tense. Jonathan stepped forward, his flashlight sweeping across the dust-covered floor. Then he saw it, a disturbance in the dust. A trail that shouldn't be there in an abandoned house. Footprints, not one, two, one large, one small. The room went still. Jonathan felt his chest tighten. He had seen this before. A predator. A victim. A child had been here. Abigail's voice dropped to a near whisper. We don't have much time. Jonathan's fingers curled around the grip of his holstered weapon. We came here to find evidence, but now they had to find life. Moment of truth. Jonathan Hayes stood frozen in the pitch-black room, his heartbeat pounding like a war drum against his ribs. The flashlight in his grip swept across the shadows until he saw it at the far end of the decaying room. A filthy rug had been pushed aside, revealing something that did not belong. A steel hatch, seamlessly embedded into the floor. The entire team stopped. No one needed to speak. They all understood. Abigail Mitchell whispered, her hand already hovering over her weapon. They pulled the hatch open. A sharp metallic screech cut through the silence, followed by a wave of frigid air thick with an unidentifiable, suffocating stench. And then from the darkness below, a sound, a shallow breath, a choked sob. Jonathan aimed his flashlight downward, his eyes locking onto a small figure huddled in the corner of the hidden basement. A girl, her hair a tangled mess, her clothes disheveled, her bare feet caked in dust and grime. But what silenced the entire room were her eyes wide, terrified, but still alive. Natalie Dawson. She had been missing for 6 months. Now she was here. Abigail dropped to one knee, her voice soft but steady. Natalie, can you hear me? The girl flinched instinctively, pressing herself further into the corner. But then through the dim light she saw Ace. The German shepherd stood still, unmoving, his deep brown eyes filled with nothing but patience and quiet reassurance. Then Natalie broke, not in panic, not in terror, but in a silent, gut-wrenching sob, a release of all the fear, pain, and horror that had been trapped inside for far too long. Jonathan Hayes took a slow, steady breath. They had found her, but the real question was, had they come close enough to catching the monster who took her? No more hiding. Natalie Dawson sat in the hospital room, her tiny hands clutching the white blanket. She still trembled slightly, but her eyes, no longer filled with terror, held a flicker of something else. Survival. Jonathan Hayes watched the child in front of him, his chest tightening. He had seen too many victims lost to the darkness. Not all of them made it back, but Natalie had. Oh, Natalie, can you tell us who took you there? The room stilled. Natalie didn't answer right away. Her gaze darted around, as if afraid that one wrong move would send her spiraling back into the nightmare. Then Ace lifted his head. The canine's deep brown eyes met hers. Steady, patient, a silent promise. You're safe now. Natalie inhaled shakily. For the first time in 6 months, she found the courage to face the truth. Slowly, carefully. She lifted her hand and pointed to the photograph on the table. Jacob Harrison. The air in the room dropped to ice. No hesitation, no uncertainty, just the truth. It was him. Natalie's voice trembled, but her words didn't. He told me he would take me home. But he lied. Jonathan exhaled, the weight of it all settling in his chest. They had known, but now they had proof. Jacob Harrison had nowhere left to run. Justice was coming. The breaking point to Courtroom was drowning in unbearable tension. Jacob Harrison sat motionless, but for those who looked closely, his hands were clenched so tightly they had gone white. He was calculating. His entire life had been built on control. His expression, his voice, his every statement rehearsed and precise. But this time, control was slipping through his fingers. The doors swung open. Jenna Collins entered, a thick case file in hand. But no one in the room was looking at her. Every eye was locked on the small figure walking beside her. Natalie Dawson. She was still tiny. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders. But her eyes, the same eyes that had once been filled with terror, were steady now. She had seen the monster, and now she was facing him. Harrison clenched his jaw, but it was that look, the piercing stare of the child he had kept in darkness for 6 months, that made him shift back, just slightly. But that wasn't what broke him. It was Ace. The German shepherd didn't bark, didn't growl, but with just one look, Ace shattered him. The courtroom fell into complete silence as Ace took a single step forward. His deep brown eyes bore into Harrison's. as if stripping away every carefully crafted lie. Harrison inhaled sharply. This can't be happening, not once, not twice. But this dog, this animal, had recognized him, every denial, every deception. Suddenly it all meant nothing. Then the impossible happened. His hands trembled, his voice cracked. I want to change my plea. A ripple of whispers erupted through the courtroom. Jenna Collins's head snapped toward him. Judge Nathaniel Morgan narrowed his eyes. What did you say? Harrison took a long, shaking breath, as if there was only one way out now. Then his head dropped, and he spoke the words no one ever expected to hear. I plead guilty. The final verdict, the last strike of the gavel, echoed through the Fairhaven courtroom. A thunderous crack, signaling the end of a storm that had raged for months. Jacob Harrison, sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The murmurs in the courtroom vanished the moment Judge Morgan spoke those words. No more escapes, no more lies. A predator was locked away, exactly where he belonged. Relief swept through the room. But the true victory wasn't in the sentence. It was happening elsewhere. At the very center of the courtroom, a 5-year-old girl stood tall. Amelia Brooks. She no longer shrank into her chair, no longer hid behind her mother. She took a single step forward, small but steady, her tiny hand clutching Ace's leash. No one asked her to speak, but she was ready. In the absolute stillness of the room, Amelia knelt down and placed her hands gently on Ace's face. When she spoke, "Thank you, Ace." 3 words, so simple, so small, but for those who witnessed that moment, from a mother who had cried herself dry to a judge whose gaze had remained unwavering, they knew what it meant. It wasn't just gratitude, it was a promise. She had found her voice again. Ace, as always, said nothing. He only tilted his head, his deep brown eyes reflecting the light of a new beginning. As they stepped outside that courthouse, the sun was shining. What do you think about this story? Do you believe that sometimes a dog can see the truth that humans overlook? If you love emotional, heart-pounding stories, don't forget to follow for more life lessons from this story. The journey of Amelia Brooks, Ace, and the pursuit of justice is more than just a courtroom drama. It is a testament to the power of the unseen, the strength in silence, the way even the smallest moments can change a life forever. Lesson 1. Silence is not weakness. It's a language of its own. Amelia's silence was not a sign of weakness, but a mark of a wound that needed to be understood in a different way. She couldn't speak, that didn't mean she couldn't communicate. And it was Ace, a dog once cast aside by the very system he had served, who became the voice she needed. Lesson: words are not the only way to understand someone. True understanding comes from listening, observing, and having the patience to truly see what someone is trying to say. Lesson 2. Second chances can redefine purpose. Ace, a once brave canine warrior, was deemed unfit for duty because of an injury. But losing his official title didn't take away his worth. Instead of continuing as a fighter, he became something even more powerful, a protector in a different way. Through his loyalty, patience, and silent understanding, he helped Amelia reclaim what she had lost. Lesson: no failure, injury, or past mistake defines your future. Second chances exist, and sometimes they lead to an even greater purpose than the one you first imagined. Lesson 3. Truth always finds a way. Justice wasn't served because of a dramatic confession or overwhelming physical evidence. Through small, undeniable signs, a child's hesitation, a dog's instinctive reaction, a moment where lies crumbled under the weight of truth. Lesson: never underestimate the power of truth. No matter how well hidden, truth has a way of surfacing when the time is right, sometimes in ways we least expect. At its heart, the story is about resilience, trust, and the power of second chances. What lesson resonated with you the most? If you love powerful, meaningful stories, subscribe for more.